at a time of transition. They had the skills which unfortunately, those who wanted to break decisively into the system really could not, didn't have, because they've been unable to develop it and exercise it under a dictatorship. So they were skillful masters of manoeuvre at a time of transition when the rules for governing states in this region, for managing interethnic relations, were changing due to the abrupt end of communism over almost half of Europe. So Iliescu's goal, and I think his achievement, at least from his perspective, was to preserve and upgrade aspects of the communist order in order that they would be the basis for supposedly plural and representative regime, one in place today. So, I think that one initial crucial task was to quickly end popular unrest, demobilize those forces who had taken to the streets. And this was accomplished everywhere, except in Timișoara, where a disciplined and genuinely popular movement, whose principal demand, I think a demand that is still very much a valid one, was that figures prominent in the communist period be debarred from holding public office. And the movement in Timișoara was an obstacle to the post-communists for several years. It was not at all easy to subdue. There was also the need to weaken the impact of major democracies and also progressive intellectual currents from Romania's own past, as well as pluralist intellectual currents from abroad. Their impact on thought and practice in the political sphere. I think there was a variable degree of success accomplished here. Certainly, one goal that was realised was to create real mistrust between democratically minded intellectuals and much of the rest of the population within 3 or 4 months of the change of leadership. There was also the need to prevent civic institutions, such as in the educational sphere, becoming a stronghold for ideas and practices opposed to those of Iliescu and of SNA. We can look at the Romanian Academy, which was hastily reconstituted. Intellectuals who had opposed Ceausescu, who were prominent in post-1989 efforts to democratize Romania, were excluded from the Romanian Academy. The Romanian Academy has got very sort of close links with counterparts all over the world, with different ministries of culture. So that was an avenue blocking change. Turning abruptly to rural Romania, where most of the population still resided after a breakneck process of industrialization. There was also a need to see that the interests of those in control of the collectivized agricultural system were preserved. And I have really no time to go into details, but if anyone wants to ask me about that, then maybe in the Q&A we can look at that. I think long-term attention was given to areas like higher education to prevent them becoming rival sources of legitimacy. The pseudo-universities that became a subject of international concern last year were being formed, within months of the end of the communist regime by functionaries with money and connections in This educational system has become an economic empire, awarding hundreds of thousands of degrees annually and severely compromising the reputation of Romanian higher education. So, within 2 months of the execution of the former ruling couple, the PSNE was an active contestant for power, and those in control probably knew that lightening the daily burden of life would not be sufficient to obtain decisive political victory. So a clear-cut decision was taken to inflame the feeling in specific parts of the country. It was assumed that this would turn the attention of many Romanians away from critically examining the recent past, demanding even faster change, so that people would close ranks to foil a vague but possibly real danger to the sovereignty of the nation presented by unsettling Hungarian demands. And you had the complicity of state agencies, the media, the intelligence services, in violence in the city of Târgu and various aides of Iliescu, have been quite candid about, their role in these events. I mean, Transylvania was the only part of the country likely to offer a strong electoral challenge to the SNA. And this challenge was blunted by the orchestration of ethnic tension. Immediately afterwards, you had a new domestic intelligence body set up. The need to prevent other outbreaks of popular violence was cited as the reason. One of the boldest examples of the double speed that characterised the moves made by Iliescu at this time. It was the first overt sign that the regime was prepared to recuperate figures who had played a controversial role under the dictatorship and offer them a new start as a protective shield for it. No time to go into that, but moving very quickly on. I think establishing a grip over the domestic media was a vital priority, especially given the decision made in February to hold early elections in May, with Iliescu's platform of SNA as a participant. Western-oriented newspapers did come into existence, but many media outlets, particularly television, defamed opposition forces, transmitted anti-democratic, anti-Western sentiments in order to reinforce the distrust of rapid change, which was already appearing among voters. I mean, historic parties vowed to be weak after 50 years of enforced inactivity, I think, were weakened still by the strategy of flooding them, the Pinochet today in particular, with informants. So I think the elections showed that only a minority were ready to assume the role of active citizens, to hold their rulers to account. Most Romanians at this time were comfortable with paternalistic rule, in which they were granted a few of the material improvements that had occurred in Poland and Hungary during the later stages of communist rule. So Iliescu was packaged as the good father, and he seemed a tremendous advance over Ceausescu, the bad father. Political awareness would rapidly increase beyond a small number, perhaps 20%, who in 1990 had concluded that Iliescu's model for Romania chiefly benefited the party and state apparatus, which continued to function under the surface. I have no time to talk about Piața Universitate or the 5-year period of collaboration with the ultranationalist ideologue Vadim Tudor, but I should say something about the brazenness of the regime in passing the Legge Revoluționară law, the law of the revolutionaries, which enabled people with no connection to the events of 1989. Many of whom have been informers, pillars of the repressive system, to obtain privileges as multicolor merited their beat in revolution as outstanding revolutionary fighters. So this was a determined effort to ruin the symbol of December 1989 as one standing for freedom against oppression. And I think the West was sluggish in its reaction. Iliescu appears to have calculated that forceful condemnation would not occur as he carried out a range of punitive measures. His regime would not be isolated. I think failure of the West to become strongly implicated in the country and its fate meant that large numbers of people opposed to what they saw as neo-communism preferred to move westwards themselves. A large immigration of civic-minded people occurred in the 1990s, whose nature and effect has still, I think, to be properly documented. I think my time is up, and I will stop. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You were very fast.